On September 25th, 2001, Silent Hill 2 was released on the PlayStation 2 and immediately became a game of all time. It settled with a Metacritic score in the upper 80s and sold over 1 million copies in the game's first month of release. But beyond the score and the financial success, Silent Hill 2 started etching its way into history as being more than just a good game, but a cult classic, seemingly joining the ranks of media such as Twin Peaks or Donnie Darko, making sure the memory of Silent Hill 2 would never fade into obscurity like the fog enshrouding the town itself. We couldn't get even a minute into the video without making a fog reference. As what usually happens with games that have a cult classic following like this, the fans carrying Silent Hill 2's memory forward began asking for more Silent Hill 2. And in October of 2022, Konami obliged their wish by announcing the release of Silent Hill 2 Remake. The announcement was received with a bit of caution, however. Konami had kind of soiled their reputation with gamers, and in addition, the remake was being developed by Bloober Team, whose games before this were averaging high 70s to low 80s on Metacritic. Not a terrible track record, but maybe not the studio you want to see handle a property as loved as Silent Hill 2 was. Fortunately for me, I had none of the skepticism nor anticipation. Silent Hill 2 just kind of existed in the same way other great old video games do. Silent Hill 2 released when I was like 5. I was not paying attention back then, and I certainly wasn't going to play it. Fast forward to today, and I wasn't really showing much interest in the remake until the week of the game's release, when the early reviews were dropping and they were almost unanimously singing the game's praises. So, does Silent Hill 2 Remake, with modern hardware and modern graphics, live up to its originator's legacy, or is that memory clouded, like the fog surrounding the town? Okay, fog, we're done. We're done with the fog. We're 2 minutes in. We're done with the fog references. Well, for the most part. Silent Hill 2 is a survival horror game. Obvious enough. And in the genre of survival horror, the story is either there or it isn't. Silent Hill 2 definitely falls on the side of the spectrum with heavy story. You start your journey because you received a letter from your long deceased wife saying she's waiting for you in Silent Hill, so naturally you have to go and find out the truth. But when you go to set out on this journey, inconveniently, or I guess conveniently for gameplay purposes, all your normal routes are closed off, and you're forced to take a detour for almost every path you take to find your long-lost partner. Along the way, you'll meet a handful of interesting characters, and also some interesting monsters with some interesting character design. The town is hostile, but despite its hostility, you march forward through the unknown, fighting creatures of unnamed origin to find Mary, your presumed dead, but maybe not dead wife. Now, I'm not sure what the storytelling experience felt like back in 2001, but I have to say that it really works for me here. At first, I was slightly put off by the storytelling for some reason. Maybe it was the character models or facial animation, I'm not sure. But whatever reservation I had quickly washed away when I heard the voice work, saw the cinematography, and witnessed just the overall presentation. There are a lot of cutscenes in this game, almost to a fault, and in those cutscenes you could easily just swap out the character models for in real life actors and change nothing else about the cutscene, and you'd be able to watch and enjoy that scene like you'd watch any movie. You can also tell it's paying homage to the source material as well, particularly when it comes to the music. Some scenes have this really mellow guitar heavy music. The best way to describe it is some of the music feels like you're listening to early 2000s jazz rock. YouTube that phrase right there, and you'll hear similarities to what I'm talking about. It doesn't distract though, it just makes you feel like you're playing a true remaster of a classic game. I don't think there's one bad actor here either, which is great because the cast is small, and one bad actor would stick out like a sore thumb when compared to Luke Roberts, the guy who portrays the main protagonist, James, who does an absolutely fantastic job. Minor spoiler here, but there are multiple endings to this game. If you've beaten this game and you have not watched the stillness ending of this game, go to YouTube right now and watch the performance on display here. It is absolutely fantastic and should adequately portray why the actor is being nominated for Best Performance. And in this scene, as well as many others throughout the game, the animation on these characters is really well done. Again, I wasn't immediately bought into this for whatever reason. Maybe it's that they do look a bit stiff in the very first cutscene. But the longer you spend with the game, the more you learn about these interesting characters. The complexity and mystery of the characters in Silent Hill 2 is really unique. They convey hurt, fear, worry, anxiety, depression, desperation throughout the whole game. A story as weird and mysterious as Silent Hill 2 requires actors that can communicate that broad range of emotions in an effective way to the player, and Silent Hill 2 does just that. One thing that did not have to grow on me though was the sound design. I played this game on PS5, and what Silent Hill 2 lacked in stable frame rate, which it really lacks in stable frame rate, it more than made up for in sound design. This has to be some of the best sound design of any game I have ever played. When you first boot up the game, you have to trudge through the woods towards the graveyard, again because every convenient road is closed off in this town. And as you make your way through the woods, you do notice that the game looks good. And I don't want to overlook that fact. The game here looks fantastic. But one thing that should immediately stand out is how the sound is played back to you through your headphones. If you're wearing headphones, you need to wear headphones when you play this game. When I was making my way towards this graveyard, I noticed every little sound all around me. The squelch of my boots as I walked through the mud and not through the regular dirt path. The sharp snapping of twigs in the woods to my right or left. Walking past a cornfield and hearing something running next to me through the corn and not seeing anything. Like that movie with Mel Gibson. This keeps up through the entire game too. You'll hear the creaking, clanging of a huge metal wall when you walk next to it, distant screams as you explore locations, or some unknown spooky ghost taking a sharp breath right next to you. Oftentimes the sound design here is scarier than the actual moment-to-moment enemies that you deal with. I was completely on edge walking next to this cornfield, hearing something running through the corn only to see nothing. But give me a weapon and an enemy in front of me, and now I'm not as scared as I was before, because I can measure what it is that's causing the noise, and I have a means to deal with the threat in front of me. But when a fear isn't given a form, our mind is left to fill in the gaps, and we'll often imagine something worse than the truth itself, and Silent Hill 2 really leans into that premise with sound design. Not to gloss over it either, but in tandem with the sound design, the music, certain tracks in this game just are unearthly to listen to. You have this like alarm that sounds like it's a breathing alarm that you just hear in the background constantly just pursuing you as the character, and it is terrible to listen to, especially in tandem with the sound design here. But sound design isn't the only commendable and scary thing about Silent Hill 2. From what I understand, in the original game, the fog was a graphical limitation. Sorry, we're talking about fog again, but not in a punny way. The fog was a graphical limitation because they couldn't render far off objects with the technology they had to work with at the time. So the developers implemented the fog to work around that, but the fog also served a second purpose, in that it was the element of making the unknown more scary, much like what I discussed earlier with sound. But that technical limitation no longer exists, so the fog is still here and it still does its job of obscuring what you can and can't see in front of you. But it's just not really that scary anymore in my opinion. Maybe it's just because the fog areas are brighter than the normal areas. What is quite a bit scarier and complements the duality of the fog is the lighting they use here. This game is dark, visually it is a dark game. Yes, metaphorically it is dark, but it is literally very, very dark. You're given a flashlight about 2 hours into the game when you enter the first big puzzle building area, but even this flashlight only serves to light things that are nearly immediately in front of you. You'll walk down a long hallway with your flashlight on and you cannot see what is on the other end of that hallway. Your light just won't reach that far. So even though you have the ability to light the dark, you're still shrouded in darkness, surrounded by the unknown. The unknown with all those spiteful sounds coming from everywhere. I was constantly impressed about how this game uses lighting and the lack of light. This is a bit of a spoiler, so if you're still trying to avoid spoilers, skip ahead a few seconds, I'll put that on the screen here. The prison sequence in particular stands out to me here. This is where you start to hear those distant screams, but the prison is also really dark, like the most dark location you have been in yet. And this is when they choose to give you that new enemy type that just scurries around really quickly. So throughout a good portion of this part of the game, you can hear what's around you and you know something is actually there. It sounds like a huge spider crawling on the wall. And you know that there probably is an enemy there, but you struggle to see what's around you. This prison is Silent Hill 2 firing on all cylinders in my opinion. It also had the jump scare that got me the most in that stupid stupid bathroom. Sound and lighting can only go so far in this game though, without an actual threat present. And in Silent Hill 2, there are plenty of them. Now, I want to preface this next section and say that I think Silent Hill 2 is a good game. The combat is just the weakest part of this good game to me, which is to say that it's absolutely serviceable. It's a third-person survival horror shooter, and if you've played like Resident Evil 4, you've played a lot of other survival horror games. Silent Hill 2 is no exception. You shoot at enemies that are hard to hit, your aiming reticle sways a little bit, making it hard to hit the enemies that are already hard to hit, and ammo is in short supply, in the beginning anyway. But something Silent Hill 2 adds to its combat that isn't traditional for survival horror games is this up close and personal melee combat. When you encounter your first enemy, James just like rips this board off of a window and says, "Yeah, that's my weapon now," and proceeds to fend off the monster with that board. You swing away at enemies like in that movie with Mel Gibson, or dodge when they attack you. And this combat is close and risky, making it a fun deviation from traditional survival horror combat. But it does kind of become repetitive the longer that you use it. One thing that just doesn't feel right is James' ability to dodge. The dodge is a total invincibility frame dodge or an iframe dodge. There's no stamina bar to manage this either, so you just need to time it right, and the timing feels pretty generous. Then you can dodge again as soon as the animation has resolved. What this does is make you, as someone only equipped with a 2x4 from a boarded up window, feel too capable. If you're facing just one enemy, the threat of death just doesn't feel real. Even the first encounter with Pyramid Head, which I gather is supposed to be a really tense encounter, just wasn't, because I knew I had infinite invincibility frames at my disposal every other second. Don't get me wrong, I still got hit plenty and had to heal plenty, but in Silent Hill 2, you're a guy wandering into a town that is trying to kill you, completely underprepared, and yet you still have this feeling of being the danger rather than being in danger. Specifically in the first section where you don't have a gun and fight the same enemy type multiple times is when you start to feel the repetitive nature of this combat and the shortcomings of this melee combat in particular. You don't get a gun until you're about a third of the way through the first building puzzle area. I think this was around 2 hours for me, but that's not my complaint. I didn't mind the fact that I didn't have a gun, but because I didn't have a gun, that left me to solely rely on the hand-to-hand combat for the first chunk of my time playing this game, which resulted in the first part of the game being my least favorite part. I appreciate the atmosphere building, I appreciate the feeling I had of seeing two of the weakest enemies close together and feeling helpless by just those two enemies. I appreciate the attention to detail in this town, making the streets and buildings feel like they actually used to be occupied. But the pacing in this opening sequence was just too long for me, and it was exaggerated by the fact that you can only rely on the melee combat, which got boring after a little while. But after you get past the initial town, the pace of this game begins to quicken. You're introduced to the main jump scare enemy, the mannequin, and absolutely this thing can go die in a hole forever. It's lurking around every corner, and even late into the game, this stupid enemy would still spook me. They are fun to fight, they hit hard, they look creepy when they walk, they look creepy when they stand still, they have a voice and like groans somehow even though they have no mouth. It's honestly just a really beautifully designed and also terribly designed enemy for a horror game. Not only are the enemies designed well, but the entire game. I tip my hat to whoever was in charge of the asset work here. Each area looks completely unique, and although I know they had to reuse assets somewhere, I never really noticed that. In fact, each object in a room felt so uniquely designed for that space that it made whatever place I was in feel so authentic. And that's the perfect word to describe the way these levels are designed in Silent Hill. Authentic. The apartments feel like they actually could have been apartments. The town feels like a town. The hospital feels like it could have been a hospital, with long hallways, a nurse's lounge, and even a cafeteria. When I was playing Silent Hill, I didn't feel like I was playing a level designed for me to explore, but rather that I was exploring the space that had already existed long before I set my hands on the controller. Essentially, what you're doing is a big ol' long escape room. You solve one puzzle, which leads to the next, which eventually will lead you out of your area, like the town or apartments, and into the next area, where you find clues, follow them, then piece them together so you can move on again. Except it's scary. things are trying to kill you and you're not really sure what's going on. I really like escape rooms, so I really enjoyed the loop of this game. The puzzles here required a bit of thought, but they're not too hard. But these puzzles, coupled with the knowledge that you have to journey to your next destination in this authentic and uniquely designed hostile environment, is where Silent Hill 2, for me, really comes together. Take this puzzle for example. It's a pretty straightforward puzzle room, but coupled with the deranged writing on the walls and that low, humming, ominous music, the puzzle feels much more tense than it actually is. And an extra layer of difficulty is automatically added because of how the room makes you feel and not just how hard the puzzle itself is to try and figure out. On that note though, there is a puzzle difficulty. I didn't mess with this, but in theory, if you want more of a puzzle challenge, you could bump the difficulty up, and if you don't really like puzzles, you could lower that difficulty. As you make your way through these locations, you'll begin to notice more and more that something isn't quite right, as if the healed, hooded spitters weren't a dead giveaway already. Between the enemies, the bizarre interactions you have with others, and the shifting rooms, the town of Silent Hill begins to feel more like a realized nightmare than an actual town. The mystery of Silent Hill and James becomes more and more dense the longer that you stay there. Don't expect to have all of your questions answered when you roll credits on this game either. While some questions are answered, there are many others that get introduced. The answer to where is Mary and is she alive will lead you to ask several other questions. And this, I believe, is the allure of Silent Hill 2. Nothing about this reality is typical. Your protagonist at first is rather normal, but as you get to know him, you see his flaws. With each cutscene that you see more characters in, they grow more and more strange. You'll end up somewhere and wonder how you even got to where you were to begin with. In Silent Hill 2 Remake, the puzzles are fun, the exploration is engaging, but the gameplay can be dragged down by a few things. For example, the ammo economy. Because of the melee potential here, you can save a lot of your bullets right up until the very end. I think I ended the game with something around 150 pistol shots, which took a lot of the scariness out of the late game scenarios. Perhaps this is by design, to make you feel as if you're some force to be reckoned with as you make your way into the final area. But if this is intentional, then it seems like a tonal mismatch from the rest of the game, or gameplay areas where you just press X over and over again to search something or jump down, or moving a crate so you can open up the way forward. I thought we were done with this in 2010. All of these minor gripes I have, while annoying, don't do enough to offset the tone and vibes of Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 is a vibes game. Each new area is enticing to explore. Finding the answer to the literal puzzle while trying to piece together the narrative ones feels like stepping deeper and deeper into the unreality that James is accepting of, and the conclusion will leave you with more questions than you may have started with. If you like narratives that do this, you'll really like Silent Hill 2. After finishing this, I find myself thinking more and more about this game. The lingering thought Silent Hill 2 Remake has left in me has been impactful in some way. I keep coming back to small details in the game, piecing together hints left throughout the story as I reflect on my time with it. Silent Hill 2 has a lot of small details that only make sense when you have the full context of the story. So, is Silent Hill 2 worth your time? I think yes, it is worth one playthrough at least. There are multiple endings in the game. It's actually a very cool system. There's like a hidden point system that there aren't any decisions that you make or come to while you play Silent Hill, but in the background the game is constantly running this algorithm, I guess, to try and find out what ending should be yours. It's a really clever way to implement multiple endings. But I do need to stress that if you don't like stories that don't make a lot of sense, that leave you with a lot of questions that you have to form some of your own theories with, you probably won't like Silent Hill 2. I really like that kind of stuff, so I enjoyed my time with Silent Hill 2. You know what else I've enjoyed my time with? You guessed it, clicking that subscribe button if you're not subscribed. Or clicking the like button if you already are subscribed. Sorry this one took a while to get out. I got sick and also got completely distracted with Call of Duty Black Ops 6. I'm sorry. Is it worth your time? No, absolutely not worth your time. Silent Hill 2 is, so is clicking that subscribe button. If you want to see more videos like this, that really just encourages me to make more, and I'm looking forward to catching you guys in the next one. Peace.